What's up, Redemption? Hope everyone's having a great week. This is another episode of the Threshing Floor podcast. This week, we're going to be sitting down with a good friend of mine, Derek Tirado, who is the owner of Your Turn Games. And we'll kind of see a little bit behind the scenes of what goes into being a retailer for Redemption and how Your Turn Games turned into what it is today. We'll also be reviewing some spoilers from the last couple of weeks that we haven't been able to do due to some scheduling issues with getting the podcast recorded. So without talking too long, we'll just jump right into it. Appreciate you for being here. All right. Thank you and welcome into another episode of the Threshing Floor podcast. My name is John Hendricks and I'm here with owner of Your Turn Games, Derek Tirado. How you doing, Derek?
Good, John. Appreciate it. And I appreciate being back on the podcast.
All right. Today, our episode is going to be kind of doing a little bit of a dive behind the scenes on the retail side of Redemption. So we'll talk to Derek kind of about what goes into running a business in the secondary Redemption market, how we come up with card values, things of that nature. Kind of just let him give us some of the experience of what he goes through running Your Turn Games. Before we get into that, Derek, for people that maybe didn't catch you on the first episode or know much about you, you want to go ahead and just hit some key points about your experience with the game?
Sure. So I got into Redemption around 2007, I believe, and that was when I was first introduced to it. I didn't play too much for it was about a month, and then kind of skipped several years and didn't really get into it again until December 2015. And then I started Your Turn Games shortly after. It was just a few months. It was February 2016 when I began Your Turn Games. And so that's kind of my brief history of Redemption there.
All right, cool. And we'll kind of unpack some more about Your Turn Games and obviously talking about the retail side of Redemption. That's kind of the whole point of this episode. So we'll get into specifics in a moment. But first, last week, just due to some scheduling issues, we kind of had to record the episode without doing what's kind of become kind of the standard is going over recent spoilers. So we didn't get any recent spoilers or discuss any of that on last week's episode, which was all about Type 2. So we've got 3 full spoilers that were released this week or in the past week to 2 weeks. We have the Church of Christ, which is a fortress, and then we've got a Good Enhancement Redemption reprint. And then we've seen our first disciple. We've got Thomas the Twin and Thomas the Assured. These cards, especially the Church of Christ. The Church of Christ seems bonkers. You wanna kind of give your thoughts on that, and then I'll pick up after that.
Yeah, sure. So I think Church of Christ, that's a really cool card. It's pretty unique, I would say, to Redemption. This is the first time you see something like this. This isn't the first time a token mechanic was used, of course. That was with Majestic Heavens, but this is the second time the token-related card is made. But this one really seems like it takes it up, a couple notches there. And so it's pretty neat, though. What I like best about it is it helps support the church theme, the clay churches from early church and persecuted church that really just, we all know, just don't have much support. They don't see much play competitively or anything of that nature. So I like to see this really go to support that theme, the church theme. And so I think that's really cool. I think it's pretty powerful, maybe over, a little too much, a little over the top. With the good gospel enhancements used by your lone follower token cannot be negated by an evil card. Maybe not. We'll see. I guess they wouldn't have probably made it the way it is without they obviously play tested it and everything. So it probably can do pretty well. But it does have high numbers, when they do create those token heroes. So sometimes it's hard to gain a niche, to do something in terms of battle winning enhancement for the CBN side. But I don't know. I think it's a great card.
Yeah, I definitely like the fact that they're offering support to make cards from early church and persecuted church, not just playable, but almost it seems like this plus a couple of other things that have already been brought to light, like ways that you can use this card. Seems like it's going to make that super viable. I believe it was Jay Chambers that first pointed out sowing bountifully with this is going to be pretty good. It's going to be actually pretty crazy. And then Jaden, it took him no time at all to bring up impartial judgment.
Oh, sure.
So
yeah,
you definitely have a lot of powerful plays that you can do with
Hmm.
that. And I think it's really cool that they're giving support to older cards that, as a competitive player, when I came in, those sets were kind of already dated because
Hmm.
they didn't have reserve access for real,
Right.
and they weren't quite up to par with the themes that were prevalent in the meta. So it's nice to see that they're trying to offer support for that and make sure that we have a wide range of deck types that we can play.
Yeah, and I definitely hope that really boosts that some. We'll see how it goes with with people actually using it as a competitive deck, but I think it's a great starter to it. To get those themes boosted.
Yeah. And Gabe posted that bounce defense. And I think this obviously is part of the reason why, because if you don't know, when you target to bounce a token, it's going to cease to exist.
Yeah, yeah, he definitely hinted there.
You have easy ways to answer if they come out and can set it up. It's going to be a pretty fun play, I think. Trying to get like an impartial judgment or
Yeah,
something
you
off
get
of
you get
that.
Windows and Narrow Light too. That I think will be even better. Um, but the thing is, notice this does not work specifically with Windows because it says cannot be negated by an evil card. Windows will negate enhancements and characters, but that's a neutral card, of course. So you have to find CBP or CBN enhancements to use with those meek heroes. But I think Windows will definitely see probably more play if people are using this card.
Yeah. And then we'll roll over to Redemption, which is a pretty cool looking card. Um, it's got a star ability that says protect meek heroes from evil cards until end of turn. So it's kind of a blanket protect for meek heroes throughout the turn, which seems pretty strong. But then you see all of the regardless of protect abilities that we've already seen come out on cards. So it's not. I don't think it's too overpowered for that to be a star ability. But then you have the enhancement. And this is just a clay enhancement that says select up to X evil cards, and X is the number of your meek heroes. And you convert the humans or selected humans and reserve the rest. You can pitch cards into your opponent's reserve. And of course, this works on turn one. You're not taking anything out of the reserve, you're putting them in. So you can come in, play this. Imagine if you play this with awesome things. They've got a territory full of evil characters or whatnot, just evil cards, and you can put
Right.
stuff into the reserve.
Yeah, it
That's
is.
that's pretty good.
And then we're only seeing a glimpse of what's coming out, and so we'll probably see as the veils pull back more, we'll end up seeing more. Cards that probably interact a little bit better with this. With that reserve, the rest, and things like that.
You see the theme with these cards. Obviously, that's clay, and it works with the Church of Christ, which is to support
Right.
kind of clay theme of early church and persecuted church. Then you roll over, and I think this is the one that most people are excited about. Are excited about the most, not just because this card is really good, and it kind of shows some of the ideas behind GOC, but the fact that it's the first disciple, and I think people are really stoked about it, about having disciples playable and seeing what their abilities are. And we finally got to see one in its full build. You've got Thomas the Twin, the purple disciple side. It's territory class, and it says if an opponent uses a search ability, you may take a good dominant from deck. If attacking, you may convert this card to meek, to ban, to a martyr. They are making it so easy to get to dominance that, and Gabe pointed out, or he said that they didn't want to have like restrict, they didn't want you not to be able to play your card, but more so if an opponent does this, then you gain an ability from it, and that's how they wanted to counter searches and things of that nature, which is kind of nice to
Yeah.
know.
So so this kind of goes in line, of course, with what we see with a lot of other territory class cards, like or the penalty, the punishment for doing X, then this will happen. So most of it is related to searching. If you search, then this will happen, like Sheol, under Dex of Soul, Wasting Disease. You could shuffle a card in the territory, and Jonah, same thing. So we're seeing obviously that again here, except this time you're not doing something to your opponent, you're gaining the benefit yourself. And it's not just any benefit, it's a gigantic benefit of getting any good dominant. I mean, um, this is definitely going to make your opponent think twice about searching to just get out a good dominant right away. And we already know it's been hinted at. There's going to be several good dominants in this new set, so it's just going to just be a great engine to get those out. But you don't even need cards anymore like Woman with Child or Solomon's Dream. Theoretically, you could just kind of slap this guy, and he's splashable. You can put him literally almost in any deck. He doesn't require a unity or anything, so you just put him out there, and hopefully, he's not negated, and you could just pull those DOMs that you need, and you could splash them in just about anywhere.
Definitely going to be pretty popular. And I also think the fact that they're making it so easy to get to dominance. I really like that because it seems like there was a lot of games in the past that I've played. A lot of games came down to who was able to get to their free 2 souls and who was able to do that. In fact, our game our game at nationals, I think, came down to you got your 2 free ones at the end and didn't
Right.
even have to do a final battle. And there's ton of games like that
Hmm.
to where somebody gets to theirs. The game that I paired up with after driving 12 hours to nationals in Texas got paired up with Jeremy in the first round, and the difference in the game, we both comboed each other with love at first sight decks, and the difference was he
Right.
got to his 2 free ones and I did not, and that was
Yep.
the deciding factor in the game. I think they're making it so easy to get to dominance now that it's not going to be what decides games. And I think your ability to play and navigate through turns that are not determined by dominance per se, like where you're going to have to be able to work yourself around putting a good rescue out, making a good block, and be able to navigate through a turn really well and be solid in making sure you hit all of your triggers and all of that, and really making it more of I don't know, more balanced gameplay to where it's going to be player skill. Like if you miss a trigger, then that's going to determine more so than hey, I was able to get to my dominant. And I think that being able to get to these also with the disciple, because it's been hinted that all of their abilities are for the most part, a lot of them get stronger if you show a dominant. I think them having a way to get a dominant quickly
Yeah.
is pretty good.
Well, this could work also for your defense. Like there's a lot of cards out there that work, or it's meant to kind of work more for your offense. For example, like Covenant with David is kind of an example where it probably is meant to get more of a human. I'm sorry, a hero king, but they design it so that it can get an evil character, and so you can get your 3 woes, your chronicles, and just use it as a defensive card, or destruction instant or any of that stuff. So it's definitely versatile. What I also like about him is I like how he is also supporting the martyr theme, which is needed because that didn't get any love since Revelation John. They really boosted and kind of introduced the martyr theme then. But if you notice, there really isn't much banding in the martyr theme. It's just mostly lone heroes. Um, and so I like how he could band to a martyr, which is I think really good. So that helps support that. The only thing is, I hope there's some good counters out there to him because this is a very strong ability. So I just hope that there's enough counters out there, like more like the stress lost soul kind of counters or confusion of mind, things like that. We are obviously that's already in the card pool, but maybe there's more in the upcoming set. So I hope that we do see more to help counter some of this too.
I wonder, not to go down a rabbit hole here, but I wonder. I know territory class. If he's removed, if the Thomas the Twin side is removed, that his ability stops working. It doesn't go through the face because he's territory
Right.
class. It's while in territory. I wonder if he comes in. If he comes into battle, converts, his ability should still work because it came and went off in battle, so it should work through the phase.
So the way territory class works is if they're removed from territory, it immediately stops working. Um,
Yeah, but then it goes off in battle because it says if attacking, you can convert. So it comes in, that happens, and then
Yeah. Well, yeah, he reactivates
I
in
want.
battle. So,
So the if they use a search ability after he's converted, you would be able to
oh,
go
I
and
see
grab
what
a
you're. Oh, I
dominant.
see what you're saying. I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, yeah. It's converting them to the clay side. I got it. Um,
Yeah, if that works, and then he can immediately ban to like Paul to negate neutral cards, and if you search, he's grabbing a dominant, and then Paul gets the draw
I
two
think
plus the
so.
negate.
I think it is because it's an ongoing ability, and it would be I think similar to some other cards out there that flip to the meek side. Um, I would believe it still carries over because until the end of that phase. Yeah.
So if you have a way to bounce him, then boom,
There's plenty of
there's a
ways to
little two
bounce.
card
Yeah.
ban that gets you a potential dominant off of a search. Those are the recent spoilers that have come to light. definitely continuing. Looking forward to GOC coming out in early 2022. Hopefully the printer stays on time
Hmm,
because I'm not sure that I'm not sure that the community would be too excited about a delay. I know that we can't control it, but man, the excitement seems like
sure.
it's maxing out right about now. So we'll kind of close the chapter on the spoiler review here from the past couple weeks, and we'll get into kind of our main topic. We'll talk to Derek here about the retail side of redemption, and let's go ahead and just I'll give you the floor to kind of tell us about the process of deciding to open a redemption business or a secondary market for redemption, and how long did it take you to start making moves toward that once you first got introduced to the game? I know you said you started 2007, came back to it around 2016. How long did it take you to make moves toward doing that?
Yeah, so it was something that when I got into redemption the second time, it was never an intent to do that. It was never an intent to create a business and retail redemption, all that. So what happened was, it was around December 2015. My son and I were playing a lot of board and card games at the time. He was Braden. He and a lot of y'all in the community know him from the national tournaments and such. He's almost 13 years old now, so he's been playing um, pretty much, I guess, half his life now, or over half his life. But so we ended up. I think he saw some starter decks. I had some I&J decks that I bought some years prior, and just kind of sat. And the reason I bought them was I wanted to. Always had a dream of kind of creating my own card game or board game, and so I kind of bought that, and I think something else to just kind of use it as like a base to get examples and ideas from to eventually create my own game. And so I was just sitting there, and he saw it in the closet, and he said, "What's that?" And so I said, "Yeah, I think you might like this." So we pulled it out, we played, learned the starter decks, and I think I remember at this point it was much easier to learn the game, play it, and teach him, of course, and teach myself, versus the first time, which was years prior. It was the EF starter decks, and they were just really advanced for starter decks. They were introducing mechanics that were just too much, I think, for new players. So we played, and then we enjoyed it, and I wanted to kind of get into a game, like a CCG like that. And of course, with my faith, I'm a follower of Christ, and I just love the fact that I love the Bible, and I love the fact that we have this game that it's like, you know all the stars are aligned, so to speak, where CCG, a good theme Bible game, love the Bible, all of it coming together. So I ended up, we went to Family Christian store locally, and to buy some booster packs. So we went there, and then they were selling it 75% off. All the redemption product. I guess they were liquidating, and this was the beginning, I guess, of when Family Christian was starting to go out of business. So they were liquidating that product, and I was like, "Oh, okay." Well, I ended up getting them, talking down to doing 85% off, and I bought all the rest of it from them. And the idea of me buying the rest was to just start a little play group, to introduce the game to people and try to just get a group of, a few of us playing and whatnot. So I figured, let me just buy the rest. And it wasn't that much. It wasn't like, a whole bunch of stuff in the store. But so I ended up buying that, and then to just have for the players. And so that was it. And then shortly after, I had this idea that I was like, well, I'd like to get some of the other product, newer product and whatnot. So I got with Rob Anderson, and he mentioned that I would need a reseller certificate to get stuff at wholesale, um, or a, like, if I was like a youth leader or something in a church, and so I could get a kind of a discount that way. So I wasn't in a position like that in church, and so I ended up going through the process of seeing what it'd be like to get a reseller certificate. So keep in mind, John, this whole time I wasn't trying to create a business to retail redemption and get it out there, right, and be some competitive redemption secondary market retailer. It was simply just to get stuff at wholesale cost, so I can start a play group and sell it to them easier and in person, versus them having to go and order it online or something, because clearly Family Christian was going out of business and they weren't going to have that stuff. So that was my whole intent with this. And so it was a relatively simple process to get the reseller certificate. and from the state of Florida. And so I did it and just did the little procedures, the legal and licensing and all that. And so from there, I just I had to create a name, a fictitious name for the business, and thought of Your Turn Games. I felt it was pretty catchy and short and sweet, and it's pretty specific and thematic to what people do in games. It's your turn, and so they that's what everybody says in a game. And so it's kind of like it's also kind of like a free marketing, so to speak, like psychological, where they would think about your business too if if they say it's your turn. And so that's where I came up with the name. And so from there forward, I ended up just kind of I was on the redemption community on the forum and asking questions and such. And I just kind of let people know I had some product to sell if they ever wanted some or needed. It was just very loose thing. It wasn't anything major. And so the irony behind it all was so at that time and later on, I never ended up creating a play group. I tried, and it just nothing ever really took off. There were and are a few players in Florida, but nothing really locally where it just didn't seem to ever take off. So so there's the irony. It just never happened the way I intended it. And then kind of fast forward down the road, it's now Your Turn Games has turned into this major secondary retailer of redemption, and that was never my intent. So, but I'm glad it did. It's been a great ride.
So, being that you didn't intend to do this for having a business, quote unquote, you were doing it for a play group, to now Your Turn Games, you go to the website, boom, you've got product listed. What is the process of going from, okay, I've got all this product, I can't start a play group or it hasn't taken hold, to now I have this website and it's all done? What was the process to getting up to where you are now?
So, so let me just give you kind of a little bit of a chronology of how it turned out. So, February 2016 is when I founded the business. And so the first year, it just hardly made any sales. It just nobody knew me. Um, I was just not. Nobody knew who I was. Nobody knew who Derek Tirado was or what Your Turn Games was, and so they just kind of stuck with what they knew and went with other retailers and such. And so so that was just. But every year from there forward, it just people got to know me more. They would meet me at tournaments and whatnot, and then there was more of, I think, a credibility and a trust being developed in the community. And so over the next few years, it just grew a little bit more and more sales came. And I kind of focused more on the sales too, because again, the local play group never really launched. It just didn't happen. So I was like, well, I have this product. I kind of need to try to sell it at this point. And I saw clearly there was also a need in the community for a secondary, secondary market retailer, because there was one that Three Lions Gaming just dominated that market for years and years, and it's, in my opinion, it's not really good for one particular company to have a monopoly. I'm all about choice, customer choice, and if one person or some players don't want to particularly pay a certain price or go to a particular place, they have a choice of going somewhere else. I think we all like that, especially as Americans. We have freedom of choice. We can go to one grocery store or this one over here, or whatever it may be. And so I felt like there was a need for that even within redemption. And that's nothing against Travis, who owned it at the time. There's nothing against him or anything. It was just more of a marketing thing. Like that's what I think people in the community need, is kind of a choice. So I started kind of building on that a little bit more. And so I had considered website design. I wanted Your Turn Games to have a website, but I really didn't know anything about all that. I'm not a computer techie kind of guy. I kind of looked into e-commerce sites and things, and kind of started something, but I just didn't really know what I was doing, honestly. And so I just kind of let it sit there. And I had other priorities going on, a full-time job and, wife and kids and everything. And so there was always priorities there that overtook website design. And so, so it really wasn't until I want to say 2000 and I think 18 or so, 2019 maybe, I can't remember, somewhere around there, where Jesse in the community, Jesse Foresto, he he approached me and he would buy for me occasionally. And he approached me before about, hey, ever thinking about getting a website? I was like, yeah, I am, but I just got to work on it over time. Well, it always sat in the back burner. And then he approached me one day and he said, hey, I'd like to, you know, build a website for you. I'd like to help you with that. I want to see that happen for the community, and I think it'd be good. And I said, okay. And I said, sure. And he had a little experience with that, so we did. And so let me back up a little bit. So around like maybe a month or so before that, it was a very short time before, I pretty much called Rob Anderson and told him, hey, listen, I think I'm going to go ahead and just kind of end my, you know, account with you. I just felt like I just wanted to move on, and didn't. I wasn't really selling it much or anything, and um, I just felt like it was kind of quote a waste of time, and like I just wasn't selling much, and I was more interested in playing than selling, honestly. And so he's like, yeah. He said, well, I'm sorry. It would be, sorry to see you go. And I never really had a full piece about like fully like letting go. I was kind of going to phase out. And then that's when Jesse kind of stepped in, and he didn't even know that. He didn't know I had that conversation. And so he approached me about it. I said, yeah, well, let's try it out. And so he started building what you see now, the yourturngames.biz, on the Shopify e-commerce platform. And so he basically designed the whole thing originally. He designed it. We would work together and collaborate and, give input of what I would like to see or whatever. And so, but he ultimately built it. And then he turned it over to me and showed me how to do things on it. And so I just took it over from there in terms of operating the website. So what you see today is in due large part to Jesse. If it wasn't for him, the website would probably still not be here.
That's a good story of kind of the community having each other's back and kind of supporting each other. That's pretty cool. Let me ask you. So you just plucked out your turn games. You said you had to have a name to put down on the reseller certificate or whatever. Did you ever plan to do other games besides Redemption? I know you were thinking about creating your own game in the future, but did you plan to branch out and do anything else after you started doing Redemption?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I ended up, so it wasn't just Cactus. I got a reseller certificate. I'm sorry, a wholesale account for. I ended up needing to buy. I wanted to buy card supplies like sleeves, deck boxes, and things like that. And so I ended up getting one with a gaming distributor, who sells those things to wholesalers. So I ended up getting a gaming distributorship account, and so I can get those items from that kind of distributor, deck boxes and sleeves and whatnot. And so they also sold like board games and other card games and things like that. So I had talked with my wife at the time, and I said, "Hey, I think I want to go ahead and kind of branch out a little bit and get into some board games to try to sell those too. Whether it was online, well, I didn't have a website, but whether it was just telling people about it or in person, like try to set up a little booth somewhere or whatnot." So I bought some board games too, and those really didn't take off at all. I still have some literally right now in my closet that are just sealed and everything. And kind of over the past few years, I've given away as gifts or maybe sold a couple here and there. But so my idea at the time was, yeah, I wanted to sell, kind of games like that. And I bought some stuff from Cactus too. They had some other games he designed, like board games and such. So I bought some of those too. And so I was kind of into that at the time. But the other thing was, yes, I wanted to. I had the vision to try to create, some kind of card game or board game. And to this day, I've kind of written down ideas. I've kind of put some things down. I just don't have too much time to really delve into it, honestly. So I just kind of, uh, some notes are there here and there, but yeah, that was kind of the idea, was to kind of use the business as that platform to create those games, and to just try to sell them through my business. Just create and sell it. And I could always sell the rights or something to some other bigger gaming company, but that was part of the idea of why I kind of chose that name, Your Turn Games, and part of the vision of the business.
Cool, cool. So I guess that's a pretty good overview of your turn games and how it came to be. So let me ask you this: as far as like general day to day operations, how much time do you spend maintaining the business?
So if you ask my wife, she'll probably give you a way more accurate answer to that than I would. She'll probably give you at least either it's going to be a realistic answer or her perceived how much time I spent on the business. Um, wow. So I have a full time job. I work, at least 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and so you have to factor in I'm at work all day, and then so if an order comes in, then if it's something that's big and I know it's going to take time to fill, thankfully Braden is at an age now where I've kind of started teaching him the ropes. And, I've had to fill orders and things like that, and so I'll kind of call him and say, "Hey, I need you to, let's say it's like somebody bought like 2 or 3 contender decks. I've had that happen before, or multiple contender decks. I'll say, hey, I need you to start building those out because I just know I'm not going to have time that night to to pull all the cards and build them out. So I try to kind of enlist his help with that. But short of that, when I'm filling orders, it just depends really on how many sales came in that day, what the size of the sale is. But I guess as a general average, if you factor in time, at work, yes. So yes, at work, I'll occasionally, do something for the business. I'm on the phone doing something or sending an email or whatever. If you factor in that time on that and time on my app, the Shopify app to help, manage the business from the back end, and then maybe fill an order or something here and there later, I would say probably, maybe an hour or two a day. So it could easily be a full time job, honestly, because I could really just take. I have a lot of ideas. I could run with all these different projects, but I simply just don't have the time to do them, and I have to triage the priorities of my life, and so I can't get to those things, and so. I just have to try to manage and work on certain projects here and there. So I just try to fill in certain gaps in my day where I have a little bit of downtime. For example, if I have an idea for a contender deck, I will start kind of fleshing that out and then building the deck out, thinking about cards to switch out. And then I'll start thinking about, the deck tips and strategies and write those down. And then I have to eventually put that on the site and then start putting that on there and write all that up. So there's a there's a bit of a process to do those kinds of things. And so I try to work on like one project like that a week. And so it just it could take a lot of time. There's a lot of hours in a week. Probably a good eight or more hours, in a week. I would say is a probably good baseline of what I spend in the business.
Yeah, so I guess I understand that a little bit with I only do the podcast, and so that's recording one episode and editing it a week. And if you asked my wife about it, she would probably like you would see the steam coming out of her ears about how much I talk about it or
Yep.
spend time thinking about it, working on an outline, coming up with ideas for future content. So I
Yeah.
definitely get that part of the dynamic there.
So
Kind of
I'll
the
tell you, it's been a process because there's been times where I've, over the past almost 6 years that Your Turn Games has been in existence. Um, we, my wife and I, she's had some meetings with me and discussed with me where her thoughts are, and um, like with time management and everything, and thank God for our wives, because they really help bring us into balance as men, and they help refine us and just kind of they're like sandpaper, man. It's not necessarily fun to go through the process, but they help smooth us out. And so, with her bringing in the perspective, like, okay, you got to focus on your priorities, and the business isn't a big priority, and it's just not. And she understands. She said, she's like, if this is like your main source of income for our family, then yeah, I totally get it. But it's not. It really doesn't do much for us in terms of monetary income or whatever, and it's kind of there as like a backup savings account. Essentially, is what I use it as. And so, I had to over the past 3 years just try to really triage and prioritize my time with it. And so there's things there's times I intentionally just don't do anything with it just because I have to make sure my family is taken care of first. And so that's my biggest thing because at the end of it all, do I want to say, hey, I had a successful business, but my family was kind of, my relationship with them kind of suffered. I don't want that testimony. So, um, but yeah, so we've had those talks, and but they're good. Obviously they're good, and so. But I think it helps me because it helps keep things in balance, but also not let the business, suffer to a point where everybody else suffers.
That's a really good way to describe it for talking to me or talking to someone else on that level about your wife's like sandpaper. She smooths you out. But listeners, do not go and tell your wife she's sandpaper. She is not going to understand that. It's not going to go over smoothly. Pun intended there.
Yeah.
um, so I think one of the things, like if I asked anybody in the community randomly, said, "Hey, I'm going to sit down with someone that's on the retail side of redemption. What's one thing you could ask?" I think one of the main questions that would come up is how do you determine card values and how do you do that for the different rarities? So you have
Hmm.
commons, you've got rares, ultra rares, you've got promos, you've got national promos, which is like the top notch. How do you come up with those values and how do you determine what they are initially and then how do they change over time?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, it's kind of a loose formula in my mind, but so I originally based my values off of Three Lions when they were again the sole main retailer, secondary retailer, and so there was really nobody else who was doing the secondary market. So I had to kind of get a little bit of a baseline, because I was coming into it, and Travis he owned the game shop before, and he set the standard in redemption in terms of at the time with the secondary market. So I had to kind of float around there, and if I was going to use him if I was going to be his competitor, and of course I had to be within that range too, and not be too high or be too low where I'm like taking a big loss or something. So I kind of used his initial prices as kind of that baseline, and at the time, since I was newer and coming in, people were getting to know your turn games more, but still new. Um, I had to have some edge where they would want to come to me, and so I ended up kind of going a little lower on my prices, than his, and so that gave me the initial competitive edge. And then over time, I just kind of set my own prices how I felt. I felt like certain cards were either undervalued or certain cards were overvalued. I felt some cards were just way overpriced, in my opinion. And it wasn't just my opinion; it was other people told me too that they just felt like some things were just way too much. And so I felt the same way. And so I would bring my prices down, or and I felt like certain cards were undervalued, so I would bring them up a little bit more. And so, and I knew that, when you bring a price up over your competitor's price, you run the chance of losing business, right? And so they could pretend to, pretty much go to your competitor and just get a lower price. But I've also noticed that there's people in the community that don't focus too much on pricing and such, and so they like customer service. They like certain aspects of why they would want to buy one business over another. I know personally, I would want to buy from a certain business if even if the price was a little bit higher, but if I was getting great customer service, or fast shipping or whatever it is, I would go with them all day long. And if I just liked, in general, just the model of that person's business. So that's kind of how that started. And over time, as I've come into my own with Your Turn Games, and it's become pretty much a main competitor, and I feel like it's kind of starting a new standard, in the secondary market, in my opinion, because of what we offer here. I kind of started setting prices at where um, it was like more of a tiered pricing system, and so I've tried to standardize a little bit more. So I've kind of gone more to that, and all this has been again an evolutionary process over the past 6 years, and so I've kind of felt like moving toward a tiered system kind of works because it kind of sets a standard for certain values where people can expect in the community. Okay, I see the prices here, and then when it goes to this level, then we know that that card is more in demand. And then when it goes to that level, it's much more in demand, and you could just keep going up from there. Or that card is definitely not in demand. So I try to really keep a finger on the pulse of the market, of what, and as an active player, I kind of know what is being played, So for single cards, for example, I know what's being played and I know what's not being played, and I try to keep a close eye on on that from that perspective, from a player's perspective. And I don't base my prices either on how much inventory I have of something. I base it simply off of a player's perspective. Like what is in demand and what is not, and so I go off of that. And so, for example, I've reduced the price on something like the Fall of Man curse, from the Fall of Man set, and it used to be probably 40 something or whatever it is, and I sell it for $25 now, just simply because not many people use that card. It doesn't sell hardly at all, and they just don't use it much. So why have that just because it's an ultra rare? Why have that at a 40, 45, $50 mark? It just doesn't make sense. But conversely, when you have Chronicles of the King and everybody wants that in their deck, and that's an ultra rare, of course, that's going to be, I have to try to buy more boxes of cards, open those packs, and try to pull those cards, which cost me more money. So part of the value of that, of course, is going to go higher because there's a higher demand and there's a higher cost on my end to have to get that and supply that demand. And so, that kind of gives you, I think, an idea of where I'm at with that. So yeah, it's been a process, and I try to keep my prices very fair. I know sometimes they might be a little higher than competitors, but understand it's not because I'm trying to make a huge profit. That is not the purpose. I want the community to know, like, that is a strong, I want them to know that that's a value of that card that they can trust. Like, say, okay, that seems like that's the right value for that card. That it's not too high and it's not too low.
You mentioned that things aren't based on your inventory at all. You do it from the player's perspective. Let me ask you about your inventory. How many cards, like individual cards, how many cards do you think you have in your inventory right now overall?
So I have monster boxes. They're called BCW monster boxes, and they hold 5,000 cards each if you just pack them full. And
And
so,
that's the 5 row boxes, right?
yes, the 5 row deep, big boxes. So I have, looking behind me now, I have one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, probably open like 10 to 12 of those. But a lot of that too is with filler cards too, like the older cards that I've gotten through um, somebody's collection, purchasing of their collection, all the filler cards from Cactus and the packs, I've opened for the newer sets, things like that. So I would estimate probably at least 100,000.
100,000.
Mm-hmm. Then that might be conservative, but it might be right on the money. I don't know, but that's my guesstimate.
Let me ask you this: how many of each card do you keep on hand? So, like, let me throw out a card. Royal Parade. I think that's a pretty useful card right now. It's pretty meta relevant. It goes in a bunch of themes. How many of those do you target to keep on hand?
So my goal is to try, and this has been a process too, where I used to put all my cards in one box and then try to inventory all that. And let's say I could have literally 30 of one card. Let's say it's a common from Prophecies of Christ or something. Now, let's say it's Eyes to See. We'll just use that as an example. I remember, I've had so many of those cards just because nobody really bought them, and I would just get them in packs and whatever else when I'm opening. And so I would say, just inventory all that. And so, but over time, I decided, well, let me just bring that down and just put like 15 in the main boxes. But then now I have it where I only do 10 in the main boxes. So when I say main boxes, I just have specific, BCW monster boxes where, LOC, POC, whatever, I'm only going to have up to 10 of one card in that. And if I have anything over that, I put that in what's called a reserve box. And then you know, that's organized too by set and some other ways I organize the cards. And so, um, so I put all the extra, anything over 10 in those boxes. So part of the reason I do that is, one, I think 10's a good baseline for how many cards of a particular, it gives me an idea of like, okay, I've got like two left. I need to probably try to find it through trade or buy through another retailer sometimes, or open more packs, things like that. So, um, and it gives me an idea of where I'm at, and it keeps my spacing limited too in those boxes, so I don't have to buy a whole bunch of other boxes, and keep shifting things around. It kind of limits what's in that box. And so the reserve cards, I have been using those mostly for, excuse me, for like battle boxes or grab bags and things like that. So a lot of those cards and those products come from reserve boxes, and there's rares in there. There's commons and all that. And so I'll kind of tap those for the other things for those grab bags and things like that. And so, but when it comes to main sales, I just try to keep up to 10, and clearly not every time I'm going to have 10. Like right now, I don't have 10 Chronicles of the King, or I don't have 10 Red Dragons or anything like that. I may have, three or four or something at a time, maybe, a little bit more or a little bit less. It just depends. So, but those higher value cards, I'm going to probably float around five or less. It just depends on, what's, how much I can get and how I can keep restocking.
So you mentioned that if you notice you're getting low on a card, you'll try to find it either through opening packs, trade,
Mhm.
or you mentioned buying from another retailer, which is perfect segue into this question.
Yeah.
How does it work with you and other retailers? And do you ever work together to determine card values or maintain your inventories, or is there some type of like turf war to where like you're just not going to use you're not going to work with them because you're trying to stand alone, or
Yeah, so it's a great question. So I do work with Ken Lachlan. He's the current owner of Three Lines Gaming, and he took that business over, I think 2019, and so bought it from Travis. And so, so I've worked with Ken. We've communicated. We talked on the phone. We text. So we give each other discounts. So there's times where he's needed an order filled. Maybe he was had a back order of a card, or didn't realize he was out of a certain card or whatever. He would place an order with me and then ask me to ship it somewhere. And so I'll do that for him and put like his label or his information there. And then he basically kind of pretty much gives me the sale. In general, he just wants to fill the order. And so, but there's times where I've gotten low on a certain card, and I could see he may have a surplus of them. So I'll get to him and say, hey, I need to order this. So I'll just go on the website usually and just kind of get my quantities or something. Um, and so we do help each other out. We give each other a discount for things like that. So we work together definitely more than we compete. Um, Ken, he's a really great guy, really nice guy, and so we have a good relationship. I think part of it too is it's a little different than your normal business relationship in the world, because typically in the world when you have competitors, you're always trying to edge out over them in terms of like, you know, Coke versus Pepsi. Coke is always trying to get all the sales while Pepsi's trying to do the same. And so I'm not trying to do that with Ken. I mean, yes, granted, I running my business, I always like to obviously want people to come to my business, but we have a mutual respect for each other, and I think our faith is there where it's more important to us than competition, business competition. It's just not. There's a little bit, of course, because it just comes naturally when you have two businesses providing the same product. You're going to have elements of competition, but it's friendly competition, and it's very respectable competition, and we keep things professional. And so we just help each other out. We have a mutual respect for each other. I like to see his business succeed in certain areas, and he wants to see mine succeed too. So that's how we work together, and I like it. And I think he likes it, and it's a good relationship we have. Now, in terms of now, we haven't really talked about values because I kind of feel like that's a little more specific to what he wants to value his cards at, or what he thinks they should be valued at, versus me. I think that's a little more specific to what to our businesses. Part of his with Three Lines, I know that's partly his family's income. For me, it's not really. It's just it's kind of a way to help the community and supply the community, and it's kind of like more of a hobby kind of thing for me. It's not my main source of income for my family. I have a I have a day job, right? So when I value my cards, I try to do it again from a player's perspective and what's in demand and market. He may have a different formula or reason why he values the cards a certain way too, and so we don't really get into that in terms of, hey, I think your card value should be this or that. That's it's totally I think respective to what we want to do.
Nice, nice. Good to see that you guys can work together a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, and our heart is to further the game, and it's a great game. It's an evangelism tool, right? It's beyond a game, and so I think that again, that's part of we're there to help each other out in that regard too. We want to see it grow, and as it grows, we grow too.
One of the most fun times for a player, at least from a player's perspective, is when a new set drops. Like I mentioned earlier when we went over those spoilers for GOC, that like the hype is at an all time high. It feels like, at least on this side of the table. On your side of the table, a new set dropping means that there's additional workload to meet the demands of players wanting the new set. And obviously, that's probably one of the strongest times to make sales and whatnot, because there's a product that people are having to get from somewhere, and you can kind of feel that need. How much work goes into it on the business side when a new set launches?
So there's a lot of work that goes into it. So the process is this. So we'll just go with GOC and Gospel of Christ because that is the newest set, and it's being released in about a month. So what happens is I get my pre-orders in, or I announce it, I get them in, whether it's complete sets or boxes or whatnot, and then I try to do by a certain date because Rob Anderson will ask for a certain, say, hey, get them into me by this day. So for example, I ended the pre-orders November 30th, special with the special deals in particular, because he wanted them in by the end of November. So I gave him my numbers the next day, December 1st, and I told him this is what I need. And so we had to order boxes. It's so we're not getting like special deals where we're getting like complete sets. There was a short time he did do that for a few sets. It helps us for sure. It helps him, Rob, because you don't have to pack cards and randomize them and do all that. So he had a process where he would send us a certain amount of cards, and it would equal X amount of boxes, and so we'd pay X amount for that. And so it was very easy to manage the single and complete sets from that. But he moved back to the going to randomization and display boxes. So it's more work on his end, but I think it generates more income for him and his family, which is totally understandable. And so and it creates sales and such. And so we buy boxes. So we'll order X amount of display boxes, and then we have to open those packs. And then whatever we get is what we get. It's all randomized. There's nothing set. So so I'll tell him what we need, and then usually he puts in however much is being printed for, and he usually does two runs. The print runs. So the first run he tries to put in, I think, a good amount, and so to meet the demand of myself and his business and any other retailers who put in the need for it. And so he tries to meet what I need or what other retailers need. And if he can't meet it on that first print run, then he's got that second one in the works. And so I know he has a second one in the works for GOC. It's only a few weeks out after this other print run. So for what if he can't meet my, we'll just use my example. If he can't use my pre-order or my request for certain boxes, then the next run he'll fill that out. So that's the process. And so once that happens, once that comes in, then what I do is so let's say if it's complete sets, I have to open all the boxes that I ordered for that and go through every card and try to build out one complete set from that. So you can imagine it's a very tedious process. So thankfully, Braden is a big help because he helped. I think he definitely helped last year with Lineage of Christ, and I think the year before. but he's definitely going to have to help this year because this has been my largest pre-orders ever. It's I've got this huge amount, and so we'll just open packs. My daughter's of age; she's 7. She's going to help open packs too and sort cards out and everything, pay him and all that. I'm not using child labor here, I am compensating them, and such. But uh, so they, so we'll do that, and then I have to, pull all the boxes ordered, and then get those shipped out, and then the complete set, same thing. So all that happens first, right? And then after that, I have to inventory basically what's left for the singles in particular. So I'll inventory all that on my website. I have to manually add images to every single card. So I got to get that from usually Gabe. He emails that to us. And then I have to upload it all as a CVS or CSV file, with all the special abilities and the card name. And it just is a lot, on the back end to upload all that to the website. So I have to do all that too, and inventory, and whatever's there, whatever I have on hand is what the community can buy, from there forward with singles. And if I run out of something, I run out. I could either try to get something through the ways I've mentioned, or I just have to open more packs, or more order more boxes from Cactus to open more packs. Whatever it is I have to do is try to meet the demand, and so or just stay out of something for a while because it's just too hard to get or something. But that's generally the process. It's pretty big. It usually takes up a good amount of time. When that new set drops, it definitely, I'm kind of out of pocket for a couple of days or so, and my wife kind of knows that's, she can't expect much from me at that point, because that's kind of my biggest time of being busy.
You mentioned that you open the box and then to make your complete sets and things. You also mentioned in there that this is the most pre-orders you've ever had for a set.
Yes.
Are the pre-orders mostly for sealed boxes, or have you had a ton of orders for the complete set, or like the rare set, the
Hmm.
common set?
Yeah. So personally, with GOC for phase one, it's been mostly boxes, and that tends to be the norm anyway. Most people I think just want to get the boxes, see what they can get, and pull and trade and things like that. But there are some people who bought complete sets too. They want to just have that and have every card, and not worry about opening random packs and have surpluses of cards they don't need. So it just depends. But yes, mostly it's display boxes. Some people buy some packs individually just to kind of open up a few. I think I only had, I think one person buy like an actual set of like legacy rares, and that was it. Yeah, I rarely see common sets being sold, rare sets, legacy rares, things like. I rarely see that. It's usually, excuse me, it's usually just packs, boxes, and complete sets.
To fill all your orders or to get your inventory of singles that you want, how many boxes do you estimate that you actually open from a new set? Like when that first print run comes in, maybe even the second print run, that first initial like wave of opening those boxes. How many of those do you think you open?
So I try to calculate it based upon experience, prior experience with complete sets, and how many cards are in the packs, all that. There's all these little factors. And so I think I kind of estimated around, I think, 5 boxes per complete set. And that's not guaranteed anything, of course, because I could get maybe 3 of the same ultra rare. And so I have to open up a 6th or 7th box or something. Or I may not even have a certain rare. Sometimes that happens where you can open 2 boxes and you never pull a certain rare card. Sometimes it's even been a common, that's no pun intended, but that's more rare than anything. But yeah, there's times where there's certain cards that are just not being pulled, or you have a bunch of a certain rare and not enough of another. So, but on average, I would say it's about 4 to 5 boxes or so per complete set. So you multiply that times however many people ordered complete sets, and then you know how many boxes you need to order. And then I try to order boxes that I know I want to just open. And so I order that many, and then I have to order whatever display boxes people have ordered, and then booster packs. I have to consider one display box for that to just open that for however many packs people buy. And I'm not too worried about like things like the legacy rare set with that one customer, because I'll probably end up being able to pull that just from all the other boxes I open for singles. So I don't really have to buy boxes for that. It'll probably just come naturally. So it's been you're talking. I plan on opening just for singles 20 to 25 boxes. But again, if I've already bought a complete set, so many boxes for complete sets, I'm going to have all those too. So yeah, so I plan on opening a lot of boxes and getting those cards ready and have them available. But that's just phase one. We're not even talking about phase two when that drops. And so and then you have to keep in mind after that, when both phases are consolidated, I have to kind of keep up with whatever cards are in demand at that time too. Did I answer your question directly, or did I just touch on it? Or
No, that's good.
yeah.
So definitely, you would, as a retailer, you probably prefer super packs, right?
Yeah, so I personally like him. I've talked to another retailer. It's not Ken, it's Steve. He doesn't have a website or anything, but we've talked before about it, and he actually prefers like the regular packs. He had a particular reason. We didn't. I don't think he really got into it, but for me though, I think super packs are better because the price per card is cheaper, and I don't need a bunch of filler cards either. So the price per card is cheaper. So let's say you do 10. You average. I pay half of what retail is. So for example, if a normal pack of cards is $5 at Cactus, then I pay about 250. That's the wholesale cost, and then that's not including shipping I have to pay and things of that nature. So if you take 250 and you divide it by like 5 cards, because think about it, 5 cards in a set is kind of what you're going to get in the newer sets. So you take that by divide it by 250 by 5, and I think that comes out to 50 cent a card. But if you do the super pack, there's 10 cards in that. Those are $8 retail, so I pay 4. So 4 divided by 10 is 40 cents. So it's 40 cents. Obviously, it's cheaper per card for me. And not only that, but I'm going to have 2 rares in there. I'm going to have extra commons, and then of course there's 2 ultra rares per box. So personally, I spend a little bit more with the super packs, but I feel like I get more value out of them because I need more of those cards, and I have a better chance of pulling certain rares that people want versus just the 5 in one pack. That's only 250.
All right. So one of the things that kind of sets your turn games apart from other retailers is that you have what's called contender decks, or I think you have a lower level that's called challenger decks.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's pretty cool because you have pre-constructed themes that are kind of relevant. They're kind of up to date with. Obviously, they don't have the full power cards or things of that nature. What was your goal with creating those and maintaining that for the community?
Yeah, so that really I think falls in line with my heart for the business and the game. So and this is probably should have been touched on by me earlier with the business and why I started it. But again, it's been kind of an evolutionary process with the business and how I've um, you know where it's at now and my original intent. So along this journey, it's been I kind of saw where the community lacked. When new players come in, and I was a new player, right? So I came in, and it's everything's new. Like the deck building rules are new, the cards are new. There's thousands of cards to choose from. You don't know what to play. You can be overwhelmed. The new player can be very overwhelmed, and especially if they've never been in a CCG before. They just probably don't know what to do. They like the idea, they want to play it, but they just don't know. They don't have direction. So it's been my heart where I saw kind of a need where these new players really need kind of to be directed a certain way, and so I felt like building pre-built decks would help because they can jump into the game. So originally, I kind of wanted to. use the cards to just kind of have another product to say, hey, I could try to get these cards moving instead of singles. If they're not selling as singles, I could try to sell them as decks. But it really just morphed over time into, you know what, I really want these decks to really be good. Like I want them to be high quality. I want them to be something where a new player can jump into the game, grab this deck, and just go with it. Um, they they don't have to worry about the deck building part of it because that in and of itself is very overwhelming. So they just don't know how to build a deck. Think about it. Most players are going to start with a starter deck, and then what do? They build off of that, and we all know they're just not competitive. Starter cards in there, they're just generally not competitive. So they may feel discouraged if they're playing in tournaments or playing casually, and they're just not doing well, and they may get discouraged and kind of leave. Well, it's been my heart to prevent that. So my heart with these pre-built decks and with the business overall changed and morphed into, I want to see this community. I want to see more players come into redemption. Number one. Number two, I want to make it easy for them to get into redemption, make it cost effective for them. They could jump into the game easy. They could engage quicker, and we have less turnover. We have less people leaving the game, newer players in particular. So that has been kind of my mission with Your Turn Games now. It's not about making a buck. It's not about bringing in all the money I can. It's this business. Trust me. If you get into a retail side of things, you really don't make that much money. There's not much of a big profit margin. People may think it, but trust me, that it is not there. That's maybe 50% average when it comes out to it. You probably make 50%, of what you put in. So that's probably your profit margin. So it's turned into that for me, where I kind of use the business as a means to get players, new players into the game easier, connected with the community more. And you saw, I think, recently where I put on the website, Redemption Resources. I really changed that out and outfitted it to have all these different resources, these great resources out there. The podcast, your podcast, and Redemption with Jaden, and Discord, all these things, they're all out there. But think about how many new players coming in know they're there. You know, I would say I would venture to say not many, unless they're introduced by somebody actively engaged in the community. So I felt like having all that pulled into one spot could really help steer and guide these new players and new customers and whatnot into the game and tap into all these great resources that are out there. So I put all that under Your Turn Games, because Your Turn Games is kind of a nexus. These are websites, our retailer websites are. They'll do a Google search, then they find us, and then they come to us. So if I can guide them into better resources, why not do it? So that's been my heart there. So with the contender decks, they just kind of morphed into that, where I want them to be strong, uh, jump into the game kind of decks. I want them to be competitive. I want them to be like, you can get every great card for this certain theme, and all you need now are probably different lost souls and the big dominants. But everything else is, or maybe a couple ultra rare centerpiece characters like David Hard After God or Zerubbabel for like post exilic or something. But short of that, I want them to have everything they need, and then they could build on that later with those bigger, expensive cards. But they can still jump in with a competitive deck. So that's my goal there. A lot of people, new players, have thanked me for building them out. They said they really helps them, and they're glad it's there. Challenger decks, that's kind of the step up from starter decks. They're still competitive. All these have evolved over time. Challenger decks were something different before, and they may even change again. But I might just leave them as classics for now, just kind of help the newer players, and keep them cheap. But anyway, so that's kind of the evolution, of contender decks. It is my flagship product. I love them. I love deck building. I love playing the game, and so um, that's part of my problems. I have to make sure I don't spend too much time, building those out. And so part of that is time with business, with my family. I had to kind of outsource some of this too, and so I felt like, well, what better person to helped build these than an amazing deck builder and a player, and that would be Jaden Alstad. I mean, I tapped him for that, and he was like, "Yeah." He was very interested, and so we have a little business agreement. And so he makes his contenders. I kind of give him a little direction of what I would like to see, or give him leeway what he wants to make, and then we make it happen, and we run things by each other, and I run my decks by him, he runs his by me, and we kind of tweak it out from there. Just last night, him and I played a couple of games, to test out a new contender he built. So but yeah, I love having Jaden on board. I like running things by him because I think that makes my decks even better, the ones I design when he gives his input. So yeah, I love him. I love the contender decks. I love new players getting in. I like seeing them, buying them, and jumping into the game and having fun with them, and just knowing that they could just build on those things and learn the game and practice. And I notice it works really well with them.
I would venture to say that you've got to be pretty excited about the fact that coming up, Meek Souls are about to become playable, which makes kind of the curve to take what you already have here in a contender deck that's just missing some staples in the dominant and lost soul category, and maybe a few key ultra rare cards. But the fact that those decks are all going to get stronger for a lower price point when Meek Lost Souls become kind of playable and defense is able to be built around that. So that's got to be kind of cool knowing that that's coming and it's going to just improve this product.
Yeah. So the cool thing is Jaden, he helped with playtesting GOC, and so he already has one up on kind of what's out there and what's to come. So I already asked him to go ahead and just start designing the GOC contender decks. When those hit market, the cards and all that, he's already designing them now, so we can have those ready for the community to jump into. So whether he's using the Meek Soul defense or just regular souls or whatever it is, I'm really excited to see what he's designing. I don't know what these look like yet. I'd have to build them myself and look at the cards and then build them. I figured why not just jump on it quicker and give it the guy who has already helped playtest them and knows what the cards are and just start designing them. So look forward to those coming up once GSC comes out.
You mentioned that Jaden helps you with those and you kick back and forth. Is he the only one that's built those and the rest of them are you? Or has anyone else in the community helped you with those?
No, it's been him and I. It's mostly mine, and then he's got his that he's designed. But no, nobody else so far. I hope I'm not missing anybody, but I'm pretty sure it's just him and I at this point. I might now when I say that I might have gotten pointers from people and ran things by him. Like for example, the flood contender deck that I recently switched to the animals versus antediluvians. I got with the players who play that deck the most, and that was Rob Smith, and I think Jay gave it a little bit of input, but I ran it by Rob Smith too, to make sure, hey, how does this look? Take their advice because these guys are the experts at that deck.
So you mentioned that change
Mhm.
to the defense with that deck.
Yeah.
How often do you go back and look at these contender decks and kind of retool them to stay current with kind of changes and evolutions of the game and the meta?
Um, That's hard to say because, gosh, they are definitely ever evolving, and so I've tried to create a standard with them now. So, for example, I think you all know, originally I didn't have all the dominants in them. I didn't have like 7 dominants, and then I got a recommendation to say, hey, you should probably put 7. I was like, okay, I'll put 7. So then I would put in the cheaper dominants, right? And we got to remember at the time these are the classic cards. Every card was being used, but then I noticed that over time though, most people would just take those filler dominants. I call them like Vain Philosophy, Destruction Neshtan, the old one of Strife, and then like Guardian of Your Soul's Apostles, things like that. They would just switch those out for the newer doms or bigger doms, whatever. So they did. They a lot of times they just were not key to strategic gameplay, with those decks. And so I just had this idea, and I ran it by a couple other people, make sure I wasn't off my rocker or something, to just take those out. And because you really just don't need those, honestly. I mean, they help support at times, but what if somebody's playing like Storehouse and you can't play Vain Philosophy now? It's dead card strife. They're not rescuing with abandoned heroes. I mean, what are you gonna do? It's just a dead card sitting in your hand. So I just chose to go with the four big ones. Son of God, New Jerusalem, and then use the new version, the copy dominant, and then Angel and Christian Martyr. And those are the staples. Now, if a certain theme has needs it, like for example, if I'm using Meek Lost Souls with some of those Brown Kings or whatever the Meek theme support, then I will put in Led Astray. If it really helps the support. If I'm using False Prophets, I'll put in Vain Vision, things like that. I'll do that. But or Flood, for example, with New Beginning. So I'll put those in to help with the theme and help with the specific strategy. So those have evolved over time and to what they are now, and they probably will continue. But in other words, they've just grown. They've morphed into what they are. What was the how often do I change these out? Okay, so things like that, certain ideas will come up and then I'll kind of change them out then. So it's really hard to put it's there's no hard timeline like every 3 months I do something. It's not like that. I think when I see the need for something, that's when I kind of make the change. Or if I realize later, hey, this card would be better, I'll just switch out a card or whatever. But in this case, like with the Flood Survivor one, we'll just take that as an example. Um, I didn't personally like the Antediluvian either. It just it themes well with Flood Survivor, of course, but it just didn't really. Yeah, it's just not a best defense. It's just not a really good defense right now. There's no reserve access, or very little reserve access. So I felt like the animals is obviously thematic, but gives way more reserve access. You can do way more with it, and pairs super well with blue or Genesis in general. And then, of course, what are the big, flood players using? They're using a Crimson defense. So at least you lay the foundation down. You may not make it strictly animals, but at least I'm laying the foundation down to keep some of it, and they could build on that. So that's kind of the idea. So if I ever see the need for something that needs to change, then I'll make the change. But I try to keep up with it, switch out cards here and there. I try to keep them fresh, relevant. I don't like them getting stale. So, and then rotation happened, right? So when rotation happened, I wanted to immediately be on the cutting edge of that and say, all right, these are going to be the competitive decks. These are the ones that are in the high level tournaments. And so what can I do? So I talked to Jaden about it. We brainstormed, and we kind of had an idea to just create them kind of like a flood and crimson defense, but I wanted to keep it a little thematic too. I like themes, and I think people like themes. I've noticed that a lot. A lot of my customers like themes in their decks. And so, and I think we all know that certain themes just really pair well with each other. And so, so I kept them more themed related. We're going to see more splash decks in the rotation, especially after GOC comes out. We're going to probably see more splash. But right now, we're keeping them themed. The rotation decks are themed, and some brigade decks where it's just the best of, or mostly the best of a certain brigade on the offense and defense. So I wanted to keep them fresh and relevant for rotation, and make those competitive decks. And people want to jump in competitive play, they could just buy one of those and run with it. And I'm having fun with it because it makes the card pool for me. The card choice is a little bit easier, honestly, when I build the decks when it's rotation because I only have so many cards to work with.
Yeah, I think from the player perspective, especially for newer players that don't have that nostalgic pull to the older cards, we all definitely love having the smaller card pool to build decks from
Yeah.
instead of having to like incorporate all the powerful older cards and whatnot. It's kind of a breath of fresh air.
Oh, it is. I love them. I love the rotation side of things. But I will say, of course, certain themes lost some good cards. All my Red Warrior, I can't use Soldier's Prayer. That's like a staple for that. Or Canaanites can't use the Stone of Thebes. Things like that, where they were really powerful cards, or like the Judges theme can't use Samuel's Edict. But whatever. It's just you move on. You try to adapt. And see what you can do with it.
So obviously, you mentioned this is your flagship product and your pride in doing these decks. So I'd like to give you the floor here because I know that you have a contender deck tournament coming up, and I'd just like for you to have the chance to kind of promote that here. See if anybody else wants to play that maybe isn't aware of that. Kind of tell us what you're doing, what the I guess the prize support for it is. I think you had a in case it is sanctioned. And if it's not sanctioned, you had two different ways you could go with that. So just give us all the details.
Yeah. So with the contender decks, I had this idea recently where it'd be really cool to have like a tournament, where only contender decks are being used. And so with I think there's about 15 or maybe almost 15 rotation contender decks that have been pumped out ever since the rotation announcement was made. I think we got way more than enough for a card pool or a deck pool for this kind of tournament. So just thought it'd be a fun thing, and I think for newer players too, it'll really be fun, and it helps level the playing field more for them, versus having these really expensive cards and these players that have been playing their decks, they know it inside and out. They all those players have an edge and an advantage over some other players coming into the game. So I think these will help level the playing field, with the experienced players and newer, and should make it a little more fun and interesting. So the first ever Your Turn Games Contender Deck tournament is coming up this Saturday it's December 18th. It begins at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. It will be a Zoom tournament. At this point, it looks like it's probably going to be unsanctioned, so it's not a sanctioned Cactus tournament where you get, prize support from Cactus and RNRS points and things like that. So, but there's no cost to jump in. The only thing you need clearly is a contender deck. So I'm not, you don't need to buy one from Your Turn Games. You could just build one from your existing card pool. You can buy cards from Your Turn Games if you need to kind of meet the deck list for a certain contender you want to use, or borrow them or trade for them, whatever. And then, or buy the deck outright if you don't have one. So there's plenty of ways to do it. And so for first place, you get $25 Your Turn Games gift card, and second place gets $15, and then third place gets a $10 gift card. And again, there's no cost to jump into play. It's just a good time to be had by all, and just good time fellowship and fun gameplay.
Okay, cool. To circle back to, I don't know if there's an opportunity to, but you mentioned that you weren't able to get a play group to take hold. Might be a really cool idea. Someone that's got a lot of card inventory in their collection, to have a couple of these decks built and having like an in-person to try to start a play group or build up your play group. It'd be pretty cool to have this like in person. So you come pick out a deck that you might already have here, and then let them play with that in a local. That's kind of an idea, a concept that someone could probably do to try to get some new players involved. That way they don't have to come with the deck. They just pick one of these pre-constructed ones up.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, well, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap it up here. Definitely, if you haven't signed up to do that and you're interested in joining the contender tournament, go ahead. I know that it was what, 9 participants you had?
Yeah,
you
so
were looking
far,
for the 10th.
So far we have 9 players who said they plan on playing, it'd be nice to have a 10th because, as you know, nobody has to get a bye during the tournament. So 10 is always an even number is always best. So if you want to jump in, come on in. We'd love to have you.
We'll go ahead and wrap up here. Thank you, Derek, for coming on and giving us like a peek behind the curtain. We're always talking about the peek behind the curtain for card creation, but to see what it is like on the retail side of redemption. And we definitely appreciate the service that you bring to the community, you and the other retailers.
Yeah, thank you, John. I really appreciate that. And thank you for having me again. It's a real honor, and love your podcast. I always look forward to coming out Tuesday mornings. I'll pop in my headphones on the way to work, or I'm at the gym, or eating lunch, or going home, whatever. I love listening to it. So thank you.
Sweet. Yep. Well, we're definitely thankful to have all the listeners too. So it's definitely a symbiotic relationship here.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, that's a wrap. Another episode in the books of The Threshing Floor. As always, we want to thank you for being here. Thank you for giving it a listen. We'd like to thank our guest, Derek Tirado, for coming on and giving us a bit of a glimpse into the retail side of redemption and what goes on in running Your Turn games. And would like to encourage anyone that is able to participate in the online Contender Deck tournament to go ahead and do so. Pretty good prize considering that there's no entry fee there. So if you can participate, go ahead and do that. Also, I'd like to let you know that the Christmas card swap signups have closed, and I am in the process of pairing off addresses and things of that nature. So be looking for me to reach out if you signed up to participate, to provide you with the name and address where you can send your cards. As always, we're always better together as a community, so I appreciate you supporting the podcast, supporting the other content creators, supporting the retail businesses of Redemption. Appreciate you, and thanks. Talk to you later.